We're back here again with some more Warhammer 40k lore content. We're gonna check out another content creator. He's called WesHammer. We're gonna check out a video he has for the orcs regarding what they think about other factions. Kind of continue our quest with the orcs because they're fun. They're funny and fun, simple but hilarious. They're honestly hilarious, and I can't really see their actual opinions. So other than that, make sure to like and subscribe. I'll be leaving the original video in the description down below. Support the channel as well. Other than that, sit back. Let's see.
According to recent polling data that I just made up, there isn't a single 40k fan in existence that doesn't love the orcs. If they say they don't, they're either lying or they hate fun. And if that's
True.
you, who hurt you? Now, part of the charm of 40k as a franchise is how bleak, dark, and comically serious it often takes itself. But right when it's all starting to feel a little too depressing, the orcs come in like a giant green wrecking ball, ready to inject some much-needed humor into the grimdark future. And what's not to love about these guys? They're a bunch of cockney football hooligans. They don't care about taking territory. They're not trying to build some grand empire. They don't even have an agenda to push. The only thing the orcs care about is fighting. And in their pursuit of getting into ever more crazy scraps, they've spread to every corner of the galaxy in order to give all of the other factions a, quote, proper kicking. But what do the orcs think of all those other factions? Do they think they're a bunch of weaklings and cowards, or do they have a lot of admiration for groups that can hold their own in a fight? Do they look at a species like, say, the Tau, who specialize in ranged warfare, as a bunch of cowards, or hold on,
my bad. Apologize for interrupting your flow right now, but because we heard about the Taus briefly, but honestly, I love this is another faction I want to jump into because of their armor. It looks sleek compared to the big, bulky everything with Space Marines, everything else. I mean, the Eldarians are very sleek as well, but they're elves. These are awesome. But honestly, yeah, I feel like orcs look like humans.
Species like, say, the
they'll be depressed.
Who specialize in ranged warfare is a bunch of cowards.
Disappointed.
Do they appreciate their taste?
Have you tried more than that guy?
What are their thoughts on factions like the Necrons, the Eldar, the Tyranids, Chaos, or the Imperium? Which ones do they like fighting against the most? And dare I say it, have any of them actually managed to earn the orcs' respect? What about some of the gods in this universe, like Khorne or the Emperor? Do they respect them as avatars of war, or think they're a bunch of wimps waiting to get pasted by Gork and Mork? We're gonna get into all that and a whole lot more in this video, as I had nothing to do but research this one for the last week after catching COVID at a Magic the Gathering event, which I know is an obvious thing to say now that
Never got into Magic.
Never got into Magic. I got the plague when I visited Nurgle's garden. It's like, what was I thinking? So yeah,
to set up your own self.
Sound a little bit off in this one. I'm still kind of getting over it. But anyways, before we dive headfirst into the Grimdark, a quick shout out to this video's sponsor. This video is sponsored.
Hold on, we get hit. Oh, it's actually cool. Hold on. It's actually a mobile game though. Oh, it's actually a mobile game. It's a Warhammer mobile game.
First Blood Angels champion, the Jump Pack Intercessors.
That's sick. It's kind of funny seeing them in there.
Kick off. There's never been a description of this Tacticus for being such a long-time sponsor
of this
Tacticus
channel. I do plan on playing Space Marine, hopefully this week. So then you guys in events.
I probably don't need to tell you this, but Warhammer 40k can get pretty dark. The Milky Way galaxy of the 41st millennium is one where hatred and loathing have been allowed to fester and spread unchecked through the minds and hearts of nearly every spacefaring species. When we try to measure how they all feel about each other, it's ultimately an exercise in splitting hairs over who they each hate the most. But right at the moment we're about to give up hope that anybody could be having a good time in the grimdark future, we're introduced to everyone's favorite boys.
Orcs.
The Orcs. A bunch of fighting-obsessed Cockney hooligans who rampage across the galaxy looking for a good scrap to get stuck in. If you know anything about 40k, I don't need to tell you just how amazing and hilarious they are, even if the people in-universe absolutely hate them. They're like a hurricane of violence that carves a bloody path across the stars and kills anyone that gets in their way. But from our perspective, they seem to have a pretty good sense of humor about the whole thing. And their passion for fighting is pretty damn infectious. The funny thing about orcs is that all of the fighting they do isn't motivated by hatred for their enemies like most other species. In fact, hate is kind of a foreign emotion to the orcs.
I want to see this
thing. And their passion for fighting is pretty damn infectious. The funny thing about
the biggest and greenest get around is the big boss. Yeah.
Orcs is that all of
and we's got to listen to
the fighting they do isn't motivated by hatred for their enemies like most other species. In fact, hate is kind of a foreign emotion to the orcs. They have no concept of.
I guess that's why I like the orcs a lot. It's because in a grim ass world of fucking violence, the most worst violence hell you could think of, the orcs are just lit. The orcs I think the orcs are the only species that are truly happy in this whole universe of Warhammer. Like, you know, the orcs definitely have to be the only people that are just enjoying their lives to the maximum, because they're literally coded and created just for war.
What it's like to hate something. Now, sure, there's things they don't like much or maybe find annoying, but they have a simple and elegant solution for that. They just fight those things, which is what they love to do, and
when in
what
doubt,
they
swing at it.
Everybody else in the universe loves as well. And speaking of fighting, it's pretty much the only thing that the orcs care about. You gotta remember that they were created 60 million years ago by the old ones as living weapons to fight against the Necrons. Every single aspect of them, all the way down to their genetics, was designed for combat. Fighting isn't just something they enjoy, it's everything to them. It is a biological need in much the same way that food or drink is for us. Because of this, the lens that the orcs view their galactic neighbors through is almost always framed by how good of a scrap they can give the boys. Now, what the orcs actually think about all of the other species they routinely go up against is admittedly one of those topics that isn't nearly as fleshed out as it could be. Insight into orc philosophy used to be pretty rare until we started getting all of the Mike Brooks orc.
She got books. The Big Daka, got Brutal Cunning, the Warps, there's a way. There's the warp, there's a way.
Novels that were written from their perspective. So Brutal Cunning, War Boss, and Big Daka, as well as a bunch of short stories and the orc codexes, are going to.
It's actually cool though, huh? What the fuck? I wonder if actually, yeah, it has to be. Their dialogues in these novels, or the codex. Well, not the codex. In the novels, they have to be written in orc language. And somebody commented, I think it was like bad British.
Serve as the primary sources for all of the information in this video. And because this script was made using sources almost exclusively written from their perspective, I'm gonna do honor to the orcs and use all of their preferred names for different factions. I'll explain them as we go, but real quick, humans are known as humies. Space Marines are beakies. All Eldar are scrawnies or pansies in the older lore, and the Dark Eldar variant is known as the spikies. Tau are fish heads or fish boys.
Fish boys
are bug eyes. Necrons, and pretty much all robots for that matter, are known as tin heads, tin boys, the tin boys, or the tinnies.
The tinnies.
Space Marines are the chaos lads with the spikes, and my personal favorite, demons are known as, quote, chaos griblies.
The chaos. Nah, I love that. The tinnies. It's simple, but it's effect. The fishies for towels, really? I mean, again, I'm not really familiar with the towels like that because we briefly heard about them, but wow. I mean, humies, yeah, we know humies from the previous orc videos. The spiky ones, the spikes, the spiky. This I like because I love how simple it is, straightforward. It's not crazy as, you know, it's not crazy as language.
With their thoughts on humies, as by far there's more information about their feelings on them than any other faction. And by examining how they view our species, we get a good framework of.
I feel like humans are mixed depending who it is.
We can use to understand their relationship with chaos and other Xenos.
But it's a mix of disappointment and
you may be surprised to hear this, but the orcs are not particularly renowned.
That's a funny ass shit, but I believe it. The starter G, shoot more, sometimes hit. You know, you shoot out Space Marines.
For being especially deep thinkers. A fun fact, one of the things that starts to happen to them as they grow bigger from surviving a ton of battles is that their brains start growing as well, and also start thinking a whole bunch more, which is something that the orcs find particularly annoying. Since the vast majority of them will get killed before they ever reach what we would consider smart, it shouldn't come as a surprise that they don't really take the time to observe all of the different nuances between.
So the bosses have kind of a similar tiny advantage.
Battle, the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Navy, it doesn't matter. They're all just humies to the orcs. This extends to even factions that we as the audience would consider so radically different that they're almost a different species entirely, like the cyborg tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, or even the friggin' Gene Stealer cults. The former is just the humie equivalent of mech boys to the orcs, and the latter is a bunch of funny looking humies with too many arms. There is, of course, one major exception to this rule, and that's the Space Marines, or the beakies, as the orcs call them, due to the fact that the Mark VI Corvus pattern power armor looks kind of like a bird. The other most common variant of Space Marine armor has a faceplate that the orcs think looks like an orc when he's straining too hard at the drops, which is their
like
word
he's taking
for
a shit.
Now that obviously doesn't make for a good nickname, so no matter what armor they're in, all Space Marines are beakies. But we'll get into their thoughts on Space Marines later in this video. In multiple scenes throughout the Orc novels by Mike Brooks and many codexes and campaign supplements from the last few decades, we get some direct quotes from the Orcs that give us a lot more insight into their views here. From their perspective, Humies are kind of weird. They're fun to fight for reasons that we'll get into shortly, but culturally, they just do a lot of things that don't make any sense. Like, for example, one of the Orcs' favorite pastimes other than fighting
I need to take the subtitles out because it blocks this shit. Like a stolen truck turned into a war machine.
Is looting. And when they end up stealing a Humie vehicle, their excitement of getting their hands on some new wheels is almost always soured by what they find inside.
Disappointing.
You see, Humies have this really annoying habit of putting all of their flashy buttons and lights on the inside of their vehicles, which, as every good orc knows, flashy gubbins are meant to go on the outside to show off to all the other boys. At least vehicles normally have a good old-fashioned set of wheels or tracks that they ride around on, which is something that the orcs respect.
I like the tanks.
Unfortunately, this isn't always the case. When they fight against the Admech, for example, or the Red Robes as they call them, their tanks float around like the vehicles of the Scrawnies, the Fishheads, the Tin Boys, and the Spikies. Now, some orcs believe this is why the Red Robes are so soft. If your ride isn't constantly being bombarded with bumps and shocks strong enough to compress your spine,
you need the wheels, bro.
Another thing that perplexes them about Humies and their trucks is that they all tend to drive on these big lines in the dirt called roads or bridges or some other stupid Humie word. They don't understand why they don't just drive wherever they want like the orcs do. Likewise, they have this hilariously weird habit of putting wheels on the doors inside of their ships and gargants, which knows, you can't drive a door. But
hey, you can't say that till you tried it, bro. You know, you can just put a wheel on it, put a wheel in that door, put a engine on it, or put a thruster on it. You can drive the door. You can drive the door technically, but it's the fucking orcs, bro. Hey, you can't drive a door, bro. Why would you put a wheel there? Why you guys have roads? Why? Well, you just drive wherever you want, bro. If you fall on a cliff, you die, bro. I love that shit. I love their insights into human culture in general. It's just funny as how even like it's funny. Was it the Red Robes? Like they're flying, their tanks fly, which looks honestly it looks amazing. But it's like that shit is too soft, bro. You gotta feel the floor. You gotta feel the bumps, everything, bro. That's now. I love the orcs. I'm just leaving it at that. Look, continue, my boy.
Humies just ain't logical. Humies also have this weird invention called an alarm system. That's only purpose seems to be to get all of the Humies all riled up and scared before a fight. Why they would invent something like this is completely beyond them. Every self-respecting orc knows that before you get stuck in, you and the lads have to amp yourself up with some hooting, hollering, and a nice loud wah at the top of your lungs. Not purposely induce feelings of fear and dread in you and all of your mates. Why they would make something like this, let alone put it on all of their buildings that contain all of their best loot, is something that continues to vex the orcs to this day.
That's what I'm saying.
Humans also love wasting time building things that don't seem to have any practical application, like libraries, schools, hospitals, or even
God damn! I thought it was gonna be about how they build their, they build the infrastructure in general. Like, damn, you guys do too much. I thought he was about to go to that point, but then we're starting talking about schools. So oh shit, wait, hold up.
Cathedrals to some bloke named the God Emperor. Beings of logic like the orcs would never build anything that wasn't specifically going to be used in a fight.
Can't use that in war.
Armor, and even some of the weird mech boy inventions all had a purpose. But with Humies, 90% of what they made was practically worthless. At least when it came to their buildings, the Humies knew to make them real big. That was something that the orcs respected. It made it more fun to knock them over. Now, although Humie cathedrals are a bit much for the orcs, all of the statues depicting the Emperor is something that they can at least wrap their minds around. Although they've never seen him, considering that he's normally depicted as being 100 feet tall with a giant flaming sword, he's clearly either the boss of all the Humies or their god. Either way, it would make sense to them that he told all of the smaller Humies to build all these things, and they have to listen to him because, again, he's the boss. Now, don't get it twisted. The god of the Humies in no way, shape, or form could stand up to true and proper gods like Gork and Mork. But so far as they can tell, if they ever manage to make it all the way to Terra and break into the Golden Throne, they're gonna get to fight a 100-foot tall Humie. So that's something that all of the orcs are looking forward to. Now, it makes sense to the orcs that the Emperor is in charge, because based on all of the artwork they've seen, he's the biggest.
Yeah.
This is how the orcs do things. The biggest orc is the boss. Not just because he's stronger than all of the other boys, but because orcs get bigger the more fights they get in. So a proper big orc has a whole bunch of experience and thus makes for a better leader. But aside from the Emperor and the beakies, all of the other humies are the same size. So they're always arguing with each other about who's in charge. This is something the boys just don't really understand, and thus Humie hierarchy of command is still an enigma to them. What they think they should do is just fight it all out and figure out who's the biggest and strongest and make them the boss. But you gotta remember,
it's funny because it kind of works that way.
Ain't logical. They do things that don't make sense, and oftentimes it's better just not to think about it.
It's
also,
true.
In their defense, humies are pink or brown, fragile and soft, not tough and green like the boys. And as Uthak pointed out in Brutal Cunning, they die a lot easier as well. If all of the humies started fighting each other, they'd all just be dead, and then there would be no humies for the orcs to crump.
That's
They're
true.
too weak for that kind of thing. And
That's true. That's actually true. I was gonna say that I can honestly picture like the orcs just chilling, but not chilling, but like, you know, before going to battle, them just trying to talk to each other like, yo, you think is the boss, bro? Like, just them generally confused, like, is he the boss? Is he the boss? Because based on their size, it's funny as hell. But honestly, damn, it's like I mean, we do it anyways, you know. Even though the orcs are confused about why we don't kill each other, little they know we actually go to war with each other a lot of the times. It never ends well. It never ends well.
Since they clearly want to keep fighting the orcs, they assume that the humies have had to make a few sacrifices in this department for the greater good of fighting. Now, humies have a lot of faults, don't get it twisted. They do a lot of weird stuff that just doesn't make any sense, and they waste an enormous amount of time not fighting when they could spend time fighting. But even after all that, the orcs absolutely love them, even if they would never admit it out loud or even understand their affinity.
Because they put up a fight.
And that's for two major reasons. One, even though they're not as good at fighting as the orcs, there's a lot of humies. Now, we as the audience know that the orcs outnumber the humies some 1,000 to 1, since they reproduce so quickly. But the orcs don't know this. From their perspective, it looks like humies are everywhere. They can be found in every corner of the galaxy. And no matter how much time they spend fighting them, there's always more humies. Every time you kill one, 10 more show up to take their place.
That's crazy because it should be the other way around.
You couldn't ask for a better trait to have in an enemy. And two, although admittedly inferior to orc technology, the tech that humies make is easily a close second.
Bro, what is that? I think it's a tie-in. But the design on it is like a whole cathedral on top of it, and its legs is a whole cathedral. What does it transform back into like a normal? What the fuck?
Inferior to orc technology, the tech that humies make is easily a close second, especially when compared to the strange, esoteric machines utilized by other Xeno species. Humie weapons and armor are powerful, efficient, reliable, and most importantly, they look like what they're supposed to be. A gun looks like a gun. A sword looks like a sword. A tank looks like a tank. Now compare that to all of the stuff used by the spikies and the scrawnies.
I love the respect.
Are dainty little things that no self-respecting orc would ever be caught.
I love the respect and the weird.
The only real issue that orcs have with Humie gear is that, quite frankly, it's
small.
Humies are always unoriginal, and as a species, they fundamentally lack creativity. Their mech boys just don't have the pizzazz or flair of an orc mech boy, and this leads to all of their
they don't have 40 cannons
exactly the same, meaning that none of them can ever tell whose stuff belongs to who. If you were to throw a whole bunch of orc guns into a pile, each of them would be able to tell immediately which one was theirs, or at least which one they liked better, and then they could probably bash the true owner's teeth in and take it for themselves.
Let me get it.
Now,
it's like a looter shooter. It's like Borderlands. You could tell which gun belongs to which faction type of shit. That's how it feels like. I mean, but I love the general respect that the orcs have for the humans because of how fun they are to fight, you know. And then like you guys are actually cool. You guys are cool in my book compared to the spikies, you know. So I actually love that kind of little respect. It is fucked up and funny, but it exists.
Don't get me wrong. This isn't a deal breaker for the orcs when it comes to measuring up whether a species is a good enemy or not. In fact, Humie gear is their favorite thing to loot aside from looting gear from other orcs. Humie gear is like a blank canvas that the orcs can work their magic on and make it proper orky. This normally takes the form of just gluing and welding a whole bunch of extra metal and scrap to them to make them extra killy. For example, beaky power claws work pretty good. They're just unoriginal. They look like a big Humie hand and don't have, big metal claws on them
some
like
rockets.
a proper power claw. But that's nothing that can't be fixed with a bit of orky ingenuity.
It's like add some rockets to the bitches. You know, it's just like, you know, it's a claw, but add some rockets to add some guns inside that you probably wouldn't be able to shoot, but you know, it's even better.
Okay, let's get into what everybody actually cares about. What do the orcs think of fighting against the humies? How do they measure up when compared to every other species? Do the orcs love it or find them annoying? Are they the orcs' preferred enemy, or does that esteemed title go to a different faction? Honestly, fighting humies is kind of a mixed bag for the orcs.
I feel it's annoying and fun.
Qualities that make them a great proper enemy, while other things, not so much. One-on-one, a humie doesn't even come close to an orc. They're short, squishy,
they're easy to kill,
soft, and most of them are cowards, with of course the exception of old Baelai and the beakies. They're proper hard. Humies are also just not really built for fighting. The orc's head is centered down low between their shoulders in the middle of their chest where they can keep it safe. But the humies have their head on top of their shoulders, just waiting for it to get knocked off. That's why humie dreadnoughts, knights, and titans look more like an orc than a humie. If they were built like a humie with their head on top of their shoulders, they would probably just wander around the battlefield all stupid-like until they got knocked over and killed. As I mentioned earlier in the video, humie tech is not as good as orc tech, but the orcs will be the first to tell you that it's pretty damn efficient. It's good at killing, and at least most of their guns actually sound like proper Daka. Not that pew-pew stuff that the fishheads, the tinnies, and the scrawnies use. Or the gross squishy things that the bug eyes fight with that aren't even actually
this is what I want to see.
Also, humies almost always understand proper fighting etiquette, a rarity in the grimdark future.
They know how to fight.
Show up to the fight with a whole lot of boys for the orcs to crump.
Exactly.
This is a kindness and a showing of respect that is not lost on the orcs. It's real neighborly of them,
oh my God.
And the lads appreciate it. Even if the orcs don't really differentiate much between all of the different humie clans, they can at least recognize that certain groups of humies utilize different tactics, strategies, and war machines. And that's something that the orcs
That's actually good.
Every orc will tell you that variety is the spice of life when it comes to fighting, and the humies, to their credit, do a pretty good job of always keeping things interesting. With them, you never really know what you're gonna get. Even if some cowardly groups of humies like to use long-range artillery to paste all the boys before the fighting even really gets started. That admittly is something I find annoying. But even
not a lie, I have the same opinion as the orcs. Every time we've seen it in like old movies, crusade, sword fighting movies, that you have such a great warrior. It's always annoying when they die to a fucking bow and arrow. That's always the most annoying part. They died to ranged artillery, bro. It's like, damn, really, bro? Let my boy come fight him one-on-one. I agree with orcs, the aspect. I mean, yeah, long-range fighting is efficient. It's actually really good for your safety, but, in terms of pride and annoyance, I agree with orcs.
Still, they recognize that this is only one humie tactic, and having a whole lot of different ways to conduct a fight is an important trait when measuring if someone's a good enemy or not.
That's 10 boys.
What about the Necrons, or the Tin Boys as the orcs call them? Are they as good of an enemy as the humies? Well, there's certainly a lot tougher than humies.
They're hard to kill.
Most of them can take a hit without even flinching. And the best part about the tinnies is that when you're done killing all of them, they'll use their reanimation protocols, stitch themselves back together, and stand back up. Then the boys can kill them all over again. Any orc who's ever tried to do this with humies will tell you that it's not nearly as fun. Now that being said, no enemy is truly perfect, and the Tin Boys do have a few flaws. Although their tenaciousness is greatly appreciated, fights against them can start to feel kinda samey after a while. It all starts to get a little bit dull. Most of the Tin Boys are mindless automatons that fight in complete silence. No war cries, no screams of pain, nothing to get the blood pumping.
Damn, I never thought of that.
Passion for fighting.
I've never thought of that.
Even some humies do. That being said, the tinnies do have some pretty great tech to loot. Sure, their tanks might float around and their guns may not be very loud, but they're proper killy and can unleash some pretty hilariously devastating effects on the battlefield. The orcs will routinely do everything they can to try to loot them. Only problem is, most of the time, when they get into a fight with them, after they finish giving them a good kicking and the tins start to run for it, they and all of their equipment starts to fade out of existence, just completely disappearing and leaving no spoils for the boys, which is real sore loser behavior. This isn't exactly widespread information, but there are some orcs that know the secret, that the best way to start looting tinny gear is not to fight them, it's to sneak into their tombs
while they're sleeping?
All still asleep. This is what the Death Skulls orcs of Wa Zort did a little while ago.
Oh shit!
Once they were inside, they proceeded to start looting like crazy. But their rambunctious enthusiasm unfortunately ended up triggering the tomb's reanimation protocols, and the boys soon found themselves surrounded by thousands of canoptic constructs.
That'd be fun, though.
Far from being intimidated, the boys were absolutely delighted. They started scavenging and stealing like crazy, and ended up using all of the Tin Boy gear to cobble together hordes of cyborgs and morkanauts and ever more improbable super weapons.
God damn!
While also hijacking some domain gates to ferry in wave upon wave of reinforcements. By the time the fighting was done and...
That's wild! They they had a crew of orcs to go into sleeping, to go loot the Necrons while they're sleeping. Man, it's actually that's actually some 1,000 IQ play for the orcs. I'll give them that. That was a pretty good move. And then of course, if you waking them up anyways, it's fun. Bring it on. Honestly, I love the Necron society. The Element Society, like the Necrons is another faction I want to check out too because they look cool.
Overlord Thamtek the Magnificent awoke to take command of his legions. He opened his eyes to the sight of an entire mob of leering mech boys standing over his sarcophagus, evil gleams in their eyes and revving power tools in their hands.
The fish boys, the Tau.
And speaking of valuable tech and those
I see we call him the fish. I see his face.
Or the fish boys have some of the fanciest tech worth looting. And
the Taus look awesome.
A bit easier to figure out than the Tin Boy machines. The orcs will routinely mock the fish boy weapons for not looking nor sounding like proper Daka. But none will argue
they look more clean and sleek.
This often makes them preferred raiding targets for the orcs from the Bad Moon clan. For example, there was a massive colony seeding ship originally known as the Hope's Light in their fishy language that was captured by Megaboss Mokrog and turned into his looted flagship, now appropriately named the Tau Killer. The boss is now been using this to wage unending war on the Kashon for about 200 years. So yeah, they've got some pretty good stuff to loot. But when it comes to fighting against the fish boys, it's ultimately a pretty frustrating affair for the...
They even have shields. Yo, not alive. We gotta check out the Tau. Because the Tau look like they're you know, it's kind of hard to say. So, like, their technology is advanced. There's you know, it's kind of hard to say that kind of in this universe, considering where everybody's at. In terms of technology, but it looks like it. They're very technologically advanced society or race. That's what it looks like. Because their whole mech has a shield on it, like actual, like, you know, like a shield. I mean, yeah, we have shields too, but actual physical shields.
The orcs. You see, the thing about
fish like barriers
is they really don't like it when you hit them in the teeth with a chopper. So they'll do everything they can to put as much distance between themselves and the orcs as possible.
Long range fighting.
That almost always, without fail, the boys will suffer unprecedented losses in the initial charge, and will almost never get the satisfaction of a good old-fashioned brawl with an enemy that actually hits you back when fighting against them. Now, you would think this would be something that would either cause them to change up their tactics or lose interest in
Makes it more exciting.
But it's not like that
more exciting.
They just accept that this is part of the territory with the fishies. Sure, it's a bit annoying, but the delay just makes it all the more satisfying when you do finally get your hands on the gits. Plus, the initial
I love how they're not delusional.
There'll be more fish boys to crump for all the boys that do survive the charge. They might put too much focus in their Daka and negate the joy of variety in a fight, but at least the fishies seem enthusiastic and passionate about fighting in their own weird fishy way. The scrawnies, on the other hand, well, let's get into it.
But I love how the orcs are they're not delusional. It's kind of weird to say that in the line with the orcs, but by what I mean like that is that they know what to expect from their enemies, you know, and they approach it the same way every single time. They're not like, oh, they changed this or that. They're not delusional.
Scrawnies and Spikies, also known as the Aeldari and the Drukhari, are probably the most annoying of all enemies that the orcs routinely fight. Somehow, they manage to be even more cowardly than Humies, which in and of itself is at least impressive. For some reason that the orcs just can't wrap their heads around,
especially with the Darwins using the warp,
more afraid of dying than any other species in the entire galaxy. Something about some pink god, it doesn't matter. They don't pay too much attention to any gods that aren't Gork or Mork, as the rest of them are just a bunch of wimps not worth thinking about. Besides, every orc knows there's two possible things that can happen when you die. Either nothing happens and then you're not bothered because there's nothing, or you go to the Great Green and meet Gork and Mork, who then subsequently reincarnate you back into the body of a new orc, so you can go back to fighting and do it all again.
Simple, even
Death
believes.
Isn't something that the orcs are afraid of. I mean, it's something to be avoided if it can be helped, but being afraid of it just ain't logical.
Of course.
All of the scrawnies, be they pointy heads, clowns, or spikies, have this real undeserved arrogance about them that the orcs find off-putting. It's like they approach the galaxy as though it should automatically behave the way they want it to, and then they get very miffed when it routinely doesn't.
And
just like how the humies do things the orcs find baffling, it's much the same way with the scrawnies, but somehow even worse. At the end of the day, for as cowardly, weak, and oftentimes stupid as humies is, they at least kinda sorta function in a vaguely similar manner to the orcs. They're just really bad at being orcs. But the scrawnies go one step further.
That's a crazy way to view it, but yeah, I see it.
Actively annoy them.
I get it.
They follow the same path as the tin boys and the fish heads, in that they make all of their trucks float around on grav lifts rather than being set on good old wheels and tracks. Also, if their guns do make any noise, it's all weird sounds that certainly aren't
electrical.
A proper gun should have enough recoil that it almost breaks your shoulder with
exactly,
every shot.
Bro.
But just like with other
exactly, bro. Like, do you feel the satisfaction of shooting somebody if the gun doesn't take your shoulder off with the amount of firepower this has? Like, imagine if it was shooting a 50 cal, it doesn't even recoil, kick, or anything. It doesn't. It just pew pew. No satisfaction. Such a big gun, bro. It's not worth it. I love the orcs. I fucking love the orcs. I love this video made me love them even more. Honestly, the way they think about other people as well, because it's so funny and logical. in a fucked up way, but it's true.
Species. Every orc that's ever fought against the scrawnies and lived long enough to have another go knows that looks can be deceiving. Just like their owners, scrawny guns are skinny, flimsy things that you could easily break over your knee without much effort. But they pack one hell of a punch. They may be weird and stupid looking, but at the end of the day, they're right killy. And from the orcs' perspective, that's something you gotta respect. Now, that's mostly just in theory, because when the orcs do actually get to fight against the scrawnies, and this goes doubly for the spikies, it's almost never as fun as it should be. They almost exclusively fight with hit-and-run style tactics, striking from the shadows, and only getting stuck in a fight they're 100% sure them and their mates can win without getting hit back. Now sure, if a line of boys and a line of scrawnies all charged at each other, both sides knew there was only one possible outcome, and it would involve the scrawnies getting a good kicking. But scrawnies didn't fight like orcs. They were always thinking about stuff. And the spiky ones had this annoying habit of laying traps to draw a couple of mobs off at a time and
I feel the orcs' pain,
which was just rude. They didn't even give the rest of the boys a chance to get in on the scrap. Also, with the spikies in particular, they have this weird fascination with fighting things that can't or won't fight back. This behavior is anathema to the orcs. It's the equivalent of shooting at rocks, which, sure enough, could be fun for at least a little while. But the point of a fight was the fight, where your blood was pumping and Gork and Mork.
I feel the orcs in this. I feel them.
It's not fun unless the other git is looking to take your head off in return.
Literally.
Further, the spikies seem to take pleasure in not just killing and fighting, but actively hurting their enemies, even after the fight is done. Sometimes they would even try to capture their enemies, avoiding the fight altogether,
and
just so they could hurt them. Now, torture is something that orcs just can't wrap their heads around. Why would you waste time poking at your enemy like this when you could just move on to another one and
exactly.
No self-respecting orc would ever engage in torture, not even to their worst enemy. The very idea makes them sick. Well, unless it was funny. Then they definitely would, and have many times in the past.
Yeah, I love the orcs.
So the scrawnies used
I love the fucking orcs. Yo, not gonna lie. I feel the orcs' pain. I feel their pain completely. Because honestly, I'm thinking about, like, what if I had to fight the Eldars in the video game? They're definitely be the type to teleport, you know, be the little scrawny eyes rats they are, bro. I swear to God, fighting the Eldars will be annoying as hell. So I agree with orcs. Honestly, I agree with them completely because they look like the type. They look the kind of people like that. They use invisible technology, this or that, or try to ambush you. It's like, nah, it's not fun, bro. We want head-on collisions, bro. That's what we want. That's it. And the torture shit is funny. So, because, like, you know, there's no point. Like, why would you waste your time with it? I mean, we know it's to gather information or for pleasure, or maybe both, or just pleasure. But
tactics that aren't much fun to fight against. And since they're a dying species and all, there's not very many of them. Both things that don't rank highly when it comes to traits of a good enemy. So, is there anything redeeming about them at all? Well, kind of, at least to some orcs. When it comes to looting, as I mentioned before, the orcs find the aesthetics of scrawny weaponry to be pretty off-putting, but they do respect its power. Likewise, they're fascinated by scrawny armor, as even though it's no thicker than an orc's finger, it's capable of stopping a bullet or a choppa just as well as
good armor.
Steel as big as an orc's fist. It's way too small for the orcs to wear though, and even if they could fit into it, they know they'd be the laughingstock of their mates. So if they do use it, they have to fashion it into the shape of something that's at least not completely humiliating. The rest of the Scrawny's gear though has a bunch of weird properties, like the ability to make portals or make things float that have no business floating. This loot is highly sought after by the mech boys, who will often pay a pretty hefty price in teeth for whatever boy manages to bring some in. So it at least has value in that aspect.
Yeah, actually, yeah, the mech boys. Oh, this all I wanted to see.
Now, the bug eyes, also known as the Tyranids, are probably about as far from scrawnies as you can get. Not only do they seem to love fighting, but there's an endless variety of different types.
They have to love fighting the Tyranids.
Not to mention the best part, there's a lot of them.
Literally, big numbers.
If not even faster than the orcs do. So when the boys find a planet currently being overrun by bug eyes, they know they're going to have more entertainment than they know what to do with. There's just a couple of small issues when it comes to fighting them.
No guns.
First,
no looting.
Whereas the scrawnies think way too much, the bug eyes don't really think of much of anything at all. They're like big squigs in that regard to the orcs. The only thing they're concerned with is getting their teeth into their next meal. Now sure, sometimes they may look organized and like they're working together, but remember, looks can be deceiving. All the boys gotta do is pop one of the big brain-looking bug eyes, and the rest of them go absolutely nuts, which, in fairness, is always good for a laugh. The second issue that they have with them is that there's just not much they can loot from them.
Yeah.
All of the bug eye weaponry isn't much use to an orc. They're all fleshy, rotting organs and not proper daka. Now that being said, their teeth, scything talons, and chitinous armor plating can be fashioned into some pretty good gear with a little
like some swords,
ingenuity.
some spikes.
But most orcs prefer metal equipment, something the bug eyes just can't offer them. Now, of course, fighting is what truly matters. No orc would argue against this.
Gotta be fun, bro.
Looting is important too. If fighting was a cake, then looting would be the frosting. And everyone knows that cakes always taste better with frosting.
It's true.
Unless it's cheesecake, but I'm getting ahead
Also
of myself.
true.
I don't think there's a single orc out there that doesn't like fighting against the bug eyes, but some orcs like it way more than all the rest. The Snakebites, for example, a more primitive orc clan that follows what they call the old ways, enjoys the thrill of the hunt and routinely targets bug eyes and other big beasties as their preferred enemy type. There's actually one tribe of snakebite orcs in particular, known as the Worm Killers, that have taken this to an entirely different level. You see, at one point, this clan was fighting against the bug eyes in some jungle on a backwater world where they discovered a big fleshy bug eye spore. They brought it back to their fleet and cracked it open, and out came hundreds of tiny baby bug eyes that quickly ran off in every direction. They would soon find that these creatures grew really quickly, and they were delighted to find their cruiser in a very short period completely overrun with them. No sooner had they bashed one in than another would appear out of a vent or a drain. Now, eventually, the cruiser was completely infested and became the mirror image of the Tyranid-infested jungle from before. The only orcs that ended up surviving were these snakebites, who had become absolute experts in hunting these beasties.
Holy shit!
Eventually, they managed to kill all of them, and when they met up with a bunch of other orcs, they were absolutely covered from head to toe in Tyranid trophies, and had taken on the name Worm Killers. This experience had been so much fun for them that they decided to hunt down more of those spore pods.
I love that shit.
They would then subsequently bring to new worlds, pop them open on their surface, and then leave for a few years, only to return to a planet completely overrun by bug eyes. It was perfect. Not only were all of the humies that lived on these worlds super mad, which the Worm Killers found really funny, but now they had a whole new planet of bug eyes to smash. Although exact numbers can't be confirmed,
that's lit. That's actually lit.
That the Worm Killers have unleashed a bug eye Armageddon on dozens of worlds, ensuring that they're never far away from a good fight.
That's fucked up and funny, but I love it because it feels like the Predator. You know, let's make it an infestation of xenomorphs. Is have fun hunting them down. You know, a predator always enjoys a good hunting challenge, but that's actually lit and fucked up. But that's not fucked up because I mean it's fucked up with everybody else, whoever's living on the planet. Because their planet is about to suffer from infestation from the Tyranids themselves, but willingly causing an infestation just to go in there and fight them is fun. But the fact that they did it on a vessel is actually pretty cool, and they won. They actually won. It's not like, you know, they did it and they lost. So, you know, it's kind of dumb, but they did it and they came up on top. That was actually, I respect it. I respect the Worm Killers, but I respect that for that one. That's actually awesome. I came up
Now,
on
the
top.
beakies are probably the most classic and iconic of all of the orcs' enemies, and it's a huge reason why they enjoy fighting against the humies so much. Pretty much
Space
every
Marines.
major weakness that the humies have when it comes to being a proper enemy, the beakies have fixed. Humans, by tradition, are soft and cowardly, but beakies are proper hard. In their armor, they're about on par with an orc in terms of size, durability, and strength. And maybe not a war boss or a knob, but at least your run-of-the-mill boy. They're also far more aggressive than regular humies, and are not prone to streaks of cowardice. Honestly, the way the orcs see them, the beakies are more like them than any other living creature in the entire galaxy. They're like kindred spirits, so to speak.
Charge.
The beakies understand that a fight is something you run towards and not away from. They're tough, strong, fast, and they'll keep fighting even after they've taken a good kicking. Not to mention, they've got good taste in both armor and daka. Their bolters are good and loud, just like the orcs' guns, and their armor is much more well-made than all of that other humie stuff, making it some of the orcs' favorite equipment to loot. Now, it should come as no surprise.
I guess I kind of fucked up because I put the humans with those beakies.
But they're not perfect. First and foremost, there's not nearly enough of them. Somehow, they might even be rarer than the scrawnies. And much to the orcs' disappointment, most of the time when they go to fight the humies, there isn't even a single beaky to bash. Second, like I mentioned earlier in the video, the orcs don't really understand the concept of hate. Anything they find annoying, they'll just fight. But the beakies, on the other hand, seem to be entirely consumed by hatred for anything and everyone that isn't a humie. Hatred drips out of every one of their pores and motivates every action they take and every decision they make. Now, sure, them being so hateful made them a bit more fun to fight, but some of the more thinky orcs actually kind of pity them in a way, which is another emotion the orcs aren't used to dealing with and they find it annoying. Get rid of it. Beakies are so consumed by hatred and an underlying bitterness that they're robbed of the joy they should be experiencing in a fight. It's like, dude, why are you so angry?
We're fighting.
You're actively engaged in the most fun thing you can possibly do, fighting.
Exactly.
To think that you need to take a chill pill is at least some kind of accomplishment.
I love that shit. What? Loads with the spike. Oh, loads with the spike, the chaos.
Now, whereas the orcs don't really think much about the different chapters of Space Marines outside of the different color that they paint their armor, they do at least recognize that there's at least two different types of beakies, because the Chaos lads with the spikes have a completely different group of mates they pal around with. Now, all beakies are proper hard, don't get it twisted, but the Chaos beakies bring a lot more variety to the table when getting stuck in. Whether they be the blue weird boy beakies that cast all kinds of weird unnatural powers, the smelly green beakies that know how to take a punch, the strange pink beakies that, if I'm just being honest, the orcs find pretty weird, or their favorite, the red beakies that seem to love fighting almost as much as the orcs do. The major issue with them, though, is that the Chaos lads with the spikes do a lot of weird stuff. Not only that, they often seem to have an agenda other than just fighting. In a lot of ways, they're more like regular humies in that aspect and less like true beakies, at least as far as the orcs are concerned. When it comes to the Chaos gods themselves, they're not really worth thinking about. Even though Khorne is absolutely obsessed with the orcs, he finds them deeply fascinating and he loves the orcs. No proper orc would ever for a moment consider worshipping a puny humie god. Gork and Mork were the only true gods any orc would ever associate with.
Khorne is not getting them.
That being said, in their defense, the Chaos boys are probably the kings of variety when it comes to fighting. You never really know what to expect with them, and thus their fights never get dull. When dealing with the warp and all of the strange, unnatural things that come out of it, things routinely get pretty weird to say the least. Especially when you're dealing with the Chaos Griblies, or the demons as the humies call them. They can show up seemingly out of thin air when you're stuck in a fight with the Chaos lads, or even when you're out in the warp minding your own business. The orcs view the demonic incursions of Griblies onto their ships as a good bit of sport, a fun way to pass the time on long journeys. And sure, Griblies are fun enough to fight, certainly is a nice change of pace between mutinies, but no matter how brutal and vicious they are, they're ultimately just not that satisfying to kill.
Can't loot them either.
When the orcs crump them, they just dematerialize, disappearing as if they were made of smoke. Every orc knows that the best part of the fight is when you lop off the enemy git's head and all the blood goes gushing out. You never get that satisfying payoff with the Griblies.
I want to cut you see your blood.
Just leaves them pretty pent up and frustrated. So most of the time, after they fight them, they just go back to fighting themselves. So the Chaos lads
we're done with the demons, let's go with each other.
In the hierarchy of enemies, just like the Griblies and the rest of the species within the Milky Way. Unfortunately though, there are some enemies that we know the orcs get stuck in with pretty frequently that have yet to be written about from their perspective, so we can only really speculate on how they feel about them. Now hopefully when Games Workshop decides to flesh out the Leagues of Votan, or the Stunties as they used to be called in old lore by the orcs, we'll also get a few stories from the orcs' perspective to see what they think about them. Likewise, the custodians, who we can assume they would love,
we gotta jump to
the
like custodians.
Bigger, harder beakies with way better gear to loot, would be right at the top of the list for the orcs' preferred enemies. But as of the time,
this is the group I want to check out too.
A book that lets us see inside of their head while they're fighting against them.
Yeah, I love the golden armor.
It's a real shame, and it's something I hope they correct in the future.
It's like Regal.
But after all this, what do you guys think? Who do you think would be the orcs' favorite enemy and why? Now, personally, I'm leaning towards regular old Humies, as they've got the most history with them outside of the Necrons and the Eldar, but none of the boys today remember the war in heaven, and they don't keep written records. So, from the modern orcs' perspective, Humies, or more specifically the beakies, are the ones that check off the most boxes when it comes to traits a good enemy should have. If you like this video and you want to see more content like it, do me a favor and hit the like button, leave a comment, and maybe subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And share this with your friends. It helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate it. Also, sorry if I sound a little bit off in this video. In the description. I've got a wicked bad flu, but it was the day I was supposed to record, so we're just making our way through it. Also, maybe check out the other videos I've got linked here in the end screen. I just recently made one on all of the differences between psychers and sorcerers, as most people incorrectly assume that they're the same thing. And I also made a how-to guide on how to properly summon a demon, at least in 40K. I had to dive into some pretty obscure source material for those two, so they're worth.
That's awesome. It was actually pretty dope. I fuck with it. Might check out more WesHammer content. Now, granted, we're not done with Lewin at all, because Lewin has a lot of videos for lores entirely that he has their factions I want to dive into. I do want to check out the Custodians as well, because the Custodians I've mentioned a couple of times, but you know, all I've seen them is their gold armor, and they're like awesome. They look elite. I want to check them out as well. So feel free to leave a link in the video, but I agree with WesHammer. I think the humans or the beakies are probably the orcs' best favorite enemy to fight, because yeah, they literally check off all the boxes. You know, big, strong, durable, big weapons, big cannons. We could loot them. They could loot them as well. And once they're done fighting the beakies, they put up a fight. They understand it. You know, besides the useless stuff that we don't talk about, like religion, even the emperor himself. You know, it has to be the humans. It is awesome that the orcs have a tribe they specialize in fighting Tyranids. That shit is awesome, because I was generally curious to see who would win in a fight, the Tyranids or the orcs. And it's actually pretty dope to see that the snake boys, the worm killers, they actually survived fighting Tyranids, you know, and that's what they specialize. That's actually pretty dope. I fuck with it heavy, and that'll be a fun story to read, because they purposely unleash spores on planets just for the sake of battle. That's what this video honestly made me love the orcs even more, because they're fucking simple. Like, what is this extra bullshit? Like, why would you waste time on this extra bullshit when it's not, you know, it doesn't help you in war, it doesn't satisfy you know, it doesn't work for war at all. It doesn't make you better for war, you know. Like, why would you do it? And then also I also agree with the Eldar, their points of Eldars. You know, Eldars like the type to be very radish. They're radish and no enemy to fight. Probably even in the games, they're probably known to fight. 100% agree with that one, definitely. But gotta love the orcs, bro. Gotta love the orcs, and their insights on us, on all of us as well. Damn, that's actually pretty dope. That's actually funny though. I just love the way their minds work. Cause like, if it's not war, then what's the point? It's like, why would he do that? Like, you know, why would he make a weapon so small and, you know, foolish? Even though it can hit a punch, why would he do that to such a weapon? You know, why do you guys have floating equipment and floating tanks? Why wouldn't you just ride on top of anything you want and feel the floor? Like, it's just, that's how they are. Like, it's just lit. I love them. I love the orcs. They're probably one of my favorite factions so far. Do want to check out the Custodians again. I do want to check out the Custodians. I think I'm gonna check out Death Watch as well. So expect those lore videos to come out soon as well. And then also plan on playing Space Marines 2 and 1. Might be Thursday or Friday, so I'll probably leave an announcement on my channel, so make sure you like and subscribe. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Again, I'll leave the original video in the description down below. Go support WesHammer pulling out. You guys probably do. Love the way he does his videos though, because it's a mix of very informative and also entertaining as well. Why not getting too meme-ish? But I respect that. I enjoyed it as well. Of course, we're still not done with Lewin. We still have a lot of Lewin videos to react to that I want to check out as well for myself. If you have a good Custodians videos, make sure leave it in the comment section. If you have a good orc cinematic that picks a war, I'll be happy to watch that. Leave in the description as well. Other than that, again, hope you guys have a good one. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys next time.